Hello everyone and welcome to my brand new series called Ranked, where I'm going to be looking for pretty much every block and everything in the game. I'm going to be ranking them on this tier list there, which I've decided to go Roman numerals for since I thought it would be a nice touch. Each item is going to be ranked from 1 to 5 in each of these three categories. You've got texture, usability and obtainability. Texture is obviously the actual look of the block. Usability is how often and how well they work in builds. And the obtainability is, well, how easy they are to get. So, without further ado, let's go into our first category, which is going to be logs. So, I'm just going to grab a few of these, like this. Okay. And I'm going to go through them. So, oakwood. If we look at the texture of oakwood, one of the original ones in the game, it's got a pretty sort of neutral texture, which works quite well in builds if you go into the usability. And this wood spawns in a lot of places. You can find it in plains, forests, jungle biomes, I guess, and any sort of biomes like that. Pretty much any sort of forest you can find this in. So I think this is going to have to be in tier 1. And same thing is going to go with spruce wood. This can work really well in medieval type builds. This is definitely a prevalent wood type back in like the original Minecraft days, and it's got a slightly darker texture which can work just as well. Spawns slightly less, but when you do find a forest, they extend for miles. So I'm going to keep this in tier 1 as well. Next up we have the birchwood. Now I'm not going to deduct any points from obtainability since they spawn quite often in some forests. But I'm going to have to deduct points to this texture. Like, I know it's realistic. It's a realistic texture if you have seen the birch tree in real life. But in Minecraft, it doesn't have the best texture. So I don't really use it often in builds. I'm going to have to go in tier number 3 for that. Just for that. Right, next up we got jungle woods. Well, I think, obviously, it doesn't spawn that much. You've got to be in the jungle. But it can work quite well in texturing. So I'm going to go in tier 2 for this. It can work quite well, an alternative to sort of more tropical themed builds, an alternative to oak. And I think acacia is going to follow similarly, because I feel that it's got a slightly more grey texture, which is unique. No other wood has this sort of like grey texture. They've all got a similar type. And I think it can work quite well for the most part. If you're going for like a safari theme build, maybe, I don't know, or like an African theme build, something like that. But I don't use it that much. If we ignore the orange there, I think this is a definite tier 2. And then dark oak, it's gonna have to be tier 2 as well. I think. I'm not a massive fan of the very dark. Like spruce is dark enough in my opinion. However, this takes it maybe a little bit too far, I feel. And so yeah, it's gonna have to go in here. But when you find a forest for this thing though, what I will add is you find a lot of it. They spawn a lot of trees and they're very thick, each one. Alright, so that's gonna be it for the main logs. I'll do the nether logs at the end. Now we're going on to strip logs, which logic probably tells you is similar, but trust me, it is not. Well, I say it's not similar. For the oak wood, yes, I'm going to have to put it up here. Obviously, to get strip wood, you need to use an axe on the wood. But, I mean, that's not too hard to do. And this works really well. It's a very neutral colour. And I think spruce is going to have to go as well. These two wood types, they just work like extremely well in like most builds, in my opinion. These 4 wood types, they're like, obviously these 2 are the original ones, and these two work quite well as well. I normally use these in floors, or sort of like the outside builds. If I want to texture up my walls a little, make them a bit smoother, I'll use these. Now birch. Birch is very similar to oak, however it's a bit lighter. I'm not a massive fan of how light it is. However, it's definitely an improvement of whatever this is. But it can be used. I've used it in the past. Same thing goes for the jungle log, which, I mean, if I look at the texture here, it just had a sort of bit of green there, and I like that. It's got a nice little bit of differentiation in the texture. It's not just sort of like, it sort of suggests there's something else on there, which I quite like. However, the acacia log, so obtainability, it wasn't strong anyway. You had to be in the savannah to get this. But this texture is a little bit too bright for me. I think this is a definite tier 3. However, I wouldn't say that it's the worst book in the game, for sure. So yeah, it's gonna have to go there, unfortunately, because basically the thing I didn't like about Acacia Log is the texture, and that's all this is. So it's gonna have to go here. Right, lastly, the dark oak wood, stripped dark oak wood, it's gonna have to go in here as well, I feel. Yeah. So just because of the similar reasons for this, it's a bit darker. Although saying that, I think I'm actually gonna put it here. These two textures quite nicely, and this can work just as well as a floor, and it's kind of like it, but you don't get sort of green texture, which I know some people don't like about this. So yeah, that's where it's going there. Well, lastly, to end up this episode, we are going to be ranking the 4 types of netherwood. So start with the stems. The stems, I'm going to have to place them both in here. These are used for like a very specific type of build, I feel. Obviously you need to go to, which is a pretty dangerous place in order to obtain these in the first place. And unless you're building like a really like never type of build, it can be hard to use these. Although what I will point out is that these textures are actually animated, which is quite nice. That is a nice touch. So yeah, those are the stem blocks. And then, although I do like these red texture on top here, that's what I do like about this one. It sort of suggests like a never filter. The stems, I'm gonna have to place the warped one here, and the crimson one up here, I think. These can both be used well for texture, and imagine down the bottom end of this. And the reason is they sort of like any sort of, I guess, fantasy related build, I guess. It's not quite as limiting as this one, but they do work quite nicely as sort of like coloured wood. They can work quite well on furniture. I'm gonna have to place the crimson slightly above, since I feel it can work slightly better than the warp one. I'd say it can mix quite well with other blocks such as the acacia here, whereas the warped doesn't really mix with anything. So that's why you're getting an edge over this. But yeah, and now we have the warped all the nether logs here. So yeah, obviously again need an axe to strip them. But I mean, all these blocks can be used. They are some of the best blocks in the game, these logs. However, that was obviously as shown by this tier list. So yeah. Anyway, first episode of Ranked. This series will continue until we get through pretty much every block in the game. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give it a like and subscribe. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.